In today's video, we're going to be painting up a Griffon from the Dungeons & Dragons Wizkids range. Okay, so first what we're going to do is we're going to start off with Leather Brown by Army Painter, and we're going to use this to paint on the Griffon, and we're going to use it to paint all our feathered areas on the face, except for we're going to avoid the main head of the Griffon, because we're going to be doing that a different colour later on. So just coming in now with our leather brown, really trying to get in between all these little gaps that it has in between the feathered areas. Quite hard to get in there, so you may want to water the paint down just a little bit and just really make sure you're giving it a good nice coat over the whole thing. We also want to make sure too that we get on the feathers that are on the front of his chest and then just on the back as well, so don't forget to do those. So anywhere where there's big feathers, just avoiding the main head and neck part is where we want to do with our leather brown. So once we have all the areas done with leather brown completed, what we're going to do now is we're going to come in with desert yellow, and we're going to use the desert yellow to paint the lion part of the Griffon, the back half of the Griffon. Don't forget I also painted the little end tuft on the tail as well, painting that the exact same leather brown that we did with our wings. So just coming in now, trying to be a little bit careful with avoiding the places that we've already painted and making sure we're getting a good coat over the whole thing with the desert yellow, which is going to bring out a nice colour for the lion's fur. Then once we have that completed and all dried up, what we're going to do now is we're going to move on with some mummy robes, and we're going to be using the mummy robes to paint the white part of the head that we've left from painting the leather brown, or I should say we're going to be turning it into the white part of the head, because basing this sort of on a classic Griffon, and I'm also basing this off the one that they have in the Dungeons & Dragons monster manual as well, which has sort of like a bald eagle head. So I'm going to come in here with our white, or our mummy robes I should say, and we're going to cover the whole thing, make sure to give it a nice coat over the whole thing. Then once we have that completed, we're going to move on now with demonic yellow, and we're going to use the demonic yellow to paint up the front feet of the Griffon, so the talons that come from the eagle portion basically. And I'm just going to be careful to try and keep it as neat as I can between the transition from the feathers to the claws at the front here. Just being nice and neat, giving it a big good coat over the whole thing, and we want to do this on both claws of course, and avoiding the very tips of the claws as well, because we'll be painting them up next. And also with our demonic yellow, we also want to be painting up the Griffon's beak with this as well, so just being very careful. If you need to, come in with a smaller brush and just give it a nice cut. And there's also a nice like sculpted detail just around the outside too, so I'm trying to catch that where the beak goes around the whole face, so you can see I'm just slightly catching up the side of my brush. So now we have all that painted up, what I'm going to do now is going to come in with Necromantic Cloak, and we're going to be using the Necromantic Cloak to paint in the Griffon's eyes. Now we want to be pretty precise with this, so I'm making sure I've got a nice fine tip on my brush, using a nice point on there and putting it on, and I'm just very carefully dabbing in the eye. Now if you do mess up, don't worry about it, because you can just wait for it to dry and then come in with our mummy robes, paint back over it, and then try again. It's just all a matter of practice. It can be quite difficult. That's why I try to look for a brush with a nice fine tip on it, so we can really get the shape of the eye in there pretty quickly. Okay, so once we have that done, we're going to come in with a matte black after that, and we're going to be using the matte black to paint in the Griffon's claws, and we're also going to be using it to paint in the back claws on the lion half as well of the Griffon. Now this is totally up to you if you want to either paint the eye in matte black as well, or paint them all up with Necromantic Cloak. It's totally up to you. I just wanted to give it a little bit of difference, because I don't think the Griffon's eyes would be pure black, so I went with matte black for the claws and kept the Necromantic Cloak at sort of a very dark grey. So once that's all done and dried up, what we're going to do now is we're going to come in now with a castle grey, and we're going to use the castle grey to paint the base that this miniature is standing on, which is a big rock. So we want to give a nice good coat of this castle grey over this base, making it look like a real big sort of cliff face or a stone that he's going to be standing on, looking out. So just making sure we're getting a nice good coat over the whole thing, as well as being really careful when we get into those points where our griffins start touching the base. So just being as neat as we can. If we make any mistakes, we can always come back with the paint to fix it up. So once we have that all done, what we're going to do now is we're going to grab Warlock Purple, and we're going to be using the Warlock Purple to paint in the griffin's tongue. So just a nice little detail that we're going to add on here, really making it look like it's a more alive piece than if we were just to leave the whole beak yellow. So just giving it, with a nice fine tip brush, just giving it a nice quick paint job on there. Then once that tongue is all painted up, we're going to come in now with Monster Brown. And what we're going to do is we're going to dry brush the Monster Brown on top of our leather brown of our wings. So I've just grabbed quite a big base brush, dry brush here to come in and really get over the whole thing, giving this a nice dry brush. So that leather brown is our base color, which is going to be the darkest pieces, and then coming now with a lighter color after that, and really giving it a real good hard dry brush on here as well. I'm not as focusing as much on the underside. I will do probably just a little bit of the underside, but I mainly want it for the top because it's where the sun's going to be hitting mostly to change the color. And of course, don't forget about the front of your griffin here on his chest. So now that we have the dry brushing complete, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with a fur brown, which is another lighter brown, and also a slightly different colored brown. And I'm going to be avoiding these top parts, and I'm just going to be dry brushing the bottom parts of the wings, or the tips of the wings, if you will. And I'm just catching them on there because what I want to do is I want to give a bit of variety to this brown on the wings. Rather than having it all one color, I thought I'd mix it up with another color here, being the fur brown is such a different brown to the leather and monster brown, which are actually quite similar. So I thought this would be really cool for the tips of the wings, really giving them off a different effect, and it'll pop more when it's on the table, giving it just a more natural look, I feel. So now with all that dry brushing complete, what we're going to do now is we're going to come in with Arrax Earthshade. I'm going to use the Arrax Earthshade to apply all to the miniature with the wash, and we're going to go pretty strongly over the miniature. So I've just grabbed a bigger brush here, and I'm really going to start working it into these recesses, which is going to be really good on this miniature with all the feathers and stuff. Adding a wash is really going to bring out all those details we've just done with the dry brushing, all those three different browns especially that we've used on the back of our wings. It's going to bring those out quite nicely. So I'm being pretty strong with it, but of course if it starts pulling too much, just coming back over it and picking up our excess with the brush. But since we've got such a large area and there's so much grooves, it's actually quite easily to pull this over the whole thing. Sorry about that. And we're also going to be using this Arrax Earthshade over the whole miniature of the griffin. So getting the underspots, we're going to be covering up the face, the beak, the claws, everything. We're going to be giving the Arrax Earthshade to really bring out everything, give it that sort of strong, earthy colour over the whole thing. Just adding all that depth in there. I feel that the dark brown wash is going to be a little bit better than the black wash. I didn't want it to contrast so much, especially on the white face and stuff like that. I feel like the brown was a better choice to have because the griffin's out in the wild, getting into all sort of messy things. Then once all that wash is dried up, you can see it's really brought out those colours quite nicely and given it a nice effect. But what we're going to do now is we're going to move on with some ash grey, I'm going to use the ash grey to dry brush the rock that he's on. Well, I've turned it into a rock. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be a rock. But what I'm going to be doing is just giving this a nice dry brush on there. Going really nice to bring out all the highlights on top of it. And so once that's done, you are now completed with your miniature. But what I'm going to do is take it to the next level. And I'm going to start first with some Stirling battlemire, which is a texture paint, which is going to give off like ground effect. So what I'm going to do now is, the miniature's all done and finished, but I'm going to give it a nice looking base. I'm going to make it sort of like he's on top of a snowy sort of hill or mountain looking down is basically the effect that I'm going to go for. So just applying this now. Now, if you're going to use this, use either a really bad brush or a popsicle stick or something to bring that out. Then once that is dry, what we're going to do is we're going to come in with our mummy robes again, and we're going to be doing this with a dry brush over top of all that texture paint we've just placed down, which is going to hopefully give it a nice sort of soft, snowy effect on it. So you can see here, just having that, looks like it's had a light dusting of snow on there, which is hopefully trying to get across the feel I want to go for of him being on a snowy sort of cliffside. And then after that, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be applying some Frozen Tufts by Army Painter, which just have some on me, which have like a nice sort of whitish sort of frozen effect on them as well, which looks really cool. So hopefully it's going to bring that effect out really good. And then I'm just going to place a few of them on here, not too much, but just a couple, to really bring out this effect like he is on top of a snowy mountain. So now that I've applied the tufts that I want, I'm going to come in now with another texture paint, which is Valhallen Blizzard, and this here gives off a really cool snow effect, which makes it look like there's a big piled up snow. I've gone for this rather than applying some snow flock, because I want him to be like he's in sort of real harsh sort of snow piles. You could also use the snow flock, like I said, to place some on, but this is a new texture paint I've got, and I wanted to give it a try. And with that, we have completed our Griffon miniature. And I think it's turned out really good for a reasonably simple miniature to do. It's not too many colours. That's why I thought I'd go in quite a bit of detail on a base as well, really making that Griffon pop out a little bit more, as well as I had some new texture paints that I wanted to try out. So I'm really happy with the result I got from those. And another thing I was quite surprised with is having those two different browns, especially with the fur brown on the leather brown, bringing out those wings in very different ways, giving a really cool effect. But I'm quite happy with the result at the end of it. But with that, I think we'll come to the end of the video. I'd like to thank you all for watching. I hope this has been useful for you guys if you ever want to paint up your own Griffon. But that's where I'm going to leave you today, and I hope to see you in the next video.